You can't do this, I said, still sitting on the bed, my body weak from the miscarriage. Daniel, I need medical care. The doctor said I need to rest for at least. The doctor said you're fine. I heard her. Physical recovery in a few days. You can rest somewhere else. He pulled out his phone, started typing. I'm calling you an Uber. 1 hour to pack. Where's your humanity? I asked, and for just a second, something flickered across his face. But then his phone buzzed, and whatever that flicker was disappeared. My humanity? He laughed, but it was hollow. You want to know where my humanity went? It went into keeping this company alive while you sat around the house planning baby names. It went into pretending everything was fine when my biggest investor pulled out last month because he heard my wife had a high-risk pregnancy. Do you know what that did to my credibility? And now there's not even a baby to show for it. High risk? Who told him that? Does it matter? The point is, you became a liability instead of an asset. I needed a wife who could host dinners, charm investors, someone who understood the game. Instead, I got you, playing house and failing at the one thing you were supposed to be able to do.
His phone rang.
He answered immediately, his voice changing to something warm and professional. Miranda, yes, I got your message about the Singapore deal. No, I can definitely make that meeting. Miranda Chun, his business partner. The woman who always seemed to be around lately, always had an emergency that needed Daniel's immediate attention. I'd asked about her once, and Daniel had laughed. She's got an MBA from Wharton and connections in Asia that could save my company. Trust me, you're not her type, and she's definitely not mine. But watching him now, the way his entire demeanor changed when he talked to her, I wondered if I'd been asking the wrong question. It wasn't about whether she was his type. It was about whether I'd ever really been his type at all. He hung up and looked at me with irritation. 45 minutes now. And leave your credit cards. They're all connected to my accounts. I have $800 in my personal checking account, I said. That's it. You know that. You've controlled all our finances since you quit your job because you said you wanted to focus on getting pregnant. Your choice, Sophia. Not mine. He was rewriting history now. He'd been the one who insisted I quit, said it was too stressful, that stress could affect fertility. I'd resisted for months before finally giving in. But there was no point arguing. When someone has decided you're the villain in their story, no amount of truth will change the narrative. I stood up, my legs shaky, and started pulling clothes from the closet. My clothes, not the designer pieces he'd bought me for company events. Those apparently belonged to the house, to the image, not to me. I grabbed the suitcase I'd brought when I moved in, the same one my grandmother had used when she came to America from Poland 60 years ago. It was worn at the corners, the zipper stuck sometimes, but it was mine. Your grandmother left you something, didn't she? Daniel said suddenly. When she died. Some kind of trust or something. I froze. We'd never talked about it in detail. Just a letter. I lied. And a few $1,000s that I used to finish college. The truth was more complicated. My grandmother had left me something, but it was locked in a trust one couldn't access until I turned 27, still 2 years away. She'd set it up strangely, through some investment firm I'd never heard of, with conditions I didn't fully understand. The lawyer who'd handled her estate said it was probably worth something, but given that my grandmother had worked minimum wage jobs her entire life, I assumed something meant maybe enough for a car down payment if I was lucky. Right, Daniel said, clearly uninterested in my grandmother's meager estate. Well, whatever. The Uber will be here in 30 minutes. I'm going to my office. I want you gone when I come back out. He left, closing the door behind him with a decisive click. I heard him on the phone again, laughing at something Miranda said. 20 minutes later, I dragged my suitcase down the stairs, each step sending pain through my abdomen. I left my house key on the kitchen counter, next to the prenup I'd signed 3 years ago without really reading it, trusting that the man who loved me would never enforce its cruel provisions. The Uber driver was a woman named Rosa. She took one look at me, pale, shaking, pulling an old suitcase, and her face softened. You okay, honey? I need to go to the Greyhound station, I said. That's 40 minutes away. You sure? The app only shows payment for. He paid for the whole ride, I said, seeing Daniel's account on her phone. He wants to make sure I'm really gone. Rosa drove in silence for a while, then said, I don't know your story, but I know that look. Had it myself once. Whatever he did, whatever he said to make you think you deserved this, it's not true. I started crying then. Really crying. Not the silent tears I'd shed in the hospital, but body-shaking sobs that felt like they might tear me apart. Rosa pulled into a gas station, went inside, and came back with tissues and a bottle of water. Where are you trying to go? She asked. Millbrook, I said. It's a small town about 6 hours north. My grandmother lived there. You got money for the ticket? Yeah. I had just enough if I got the cheapest seat and didn't eat for the next day. I don't date patients, I told him, which was true but also something I said because men like him didn't usually notice women like me unless they wanted something temporary. Then I'll switch doctors, he said, and he did. The next day, he called the clinic, confirmed he'd transferred to another practice, and asked me again. Our first date was nothing like what I'd expected. Instead of some fancy restaurant where I'd feel out of place, he took me to a food truck festival. We sat on a bench eating Korean tacos while he told me about growing up with parents who measured love in achievements and money in the bank. My father made his first million by 30, Daniel said, wiping sauce from his chin with a napkin. He never let me forget that I was behind schedule. When I hit that same milestone at 28, you know what he said? 2 years late, but I suppose that's acceptable. I told him about losing my parents, about my grandmother, who raised me in a town so small it didn't even have a Starbucks. She always said money wasn't everything, but it sure helped when you didn't have it, I said. She worked 3 jobs to keep me fed and clothed. Cleaned houses, worked at the grocery store, did seamless work in the evenings. I used to fall asleep watching her fingers move over fabric, making invisible repairs to expensive clothes for people who'd never know her name. She sounds amazing, Daniel said, and the way he said it, I believed he meant it.
She was.
She died my sophomore year of college, left me just enough to finish school, and a letter telling me to make something of myself. So here I am, answering phones at a medical clinic, definitely living the dream. He laughed, but not in a mocking way. You know what I like about you, Sophia? You're real. Do you know how rare that is in my world? We dated for 6 months before he proposed. In that time, I met his family exactly twice. His mother, Patricia, looked at me like I was a stain on her Persian rug. His father, William, didn't look at me at all. During a particularly painful dinner at their estate, Patricia pulled me aside while the men discussed business. I'm sure you're a lovely girl, she said, her smile sharp as winter. But you need to understand that Daniel has responsibilities. Expectations. He needs a wife who can navigate his world, who brings something to the table besides. She paused, looking me up and down, enthusiasm. I should have listened to her. Not because she was right about me not being enough, but because she was telling me exactly who they all were. But Daniel found me crying in their bathroom, and when I told him what she'd said, he held me tight and whispered, I don't care what she thinks. I love you, because you're nothing like them. The wedding was small, just a courthouse ceremony with 2 witnesses we pulled in from the hallway. Daniel said he wanted it that way, just us, no fuss. I thought it was romantic. Later, I realized he was embarrassed. He never even told his colleagues he'd gotten married for the first 3 months. When he finally did, he introduced me at a company party as his wife, and I watched every woman in the room reassess me, trying to figure out how I'd landed him. That first year was actually good. Daniel was attentive, generous, excited about our future. He bought the house in the hills, said it was our fresh start. He talked about children constantly, how he wanted 3, maybe 4. I want to give them everything I never had, he said, and when I asked what that was since he'd grown up wealthy, he said, parents who actually show up. The problem started when I couldn't get pregnant right away. Month after month, negative tests. Daniel grew frustrated, then distant. He started staying later at work, missing dinners, forgetting anniversaries. When I finally got pregnant after 18 months of trying, I thought everything would go back to normal. He seemed happy at first, bought a crib that cost more than most people's rent, started converting the guest room into a nursery. But then his company hit a rough patch. A competitor came out with better technology, and suddenly Daniel's million-dollar contracts were getting canceled. He became obsessed with saving the company, with proving he wasn't a failure. The baby became just another pressure, another timeline, another thing that needed to go right. "Your job is to carry this baby," he told me one night when I suggested maybe we should talk about what was happening with us. "My job is to make sure it has a future worth being born into." I accepted it. I accepted all of it. The loneliness, the way he'd snap at me when I asked how his day went, the way he'd look at my growing belly with something between hope and resentment. I told myself it was temporary, that stress did this to people, that once the baby came and his company recovered, we'd be happy again. My grandmother used to tell me that people show you who they are in their worst moments, not their best. Anyone can be charming when life is easy, she'd say, while patching up another rich person's designer dress. But you watch how they act when things get hard. That's when you see the truth. I thought about calling her so many times during those months, forgetting for moments that she was gone. I'd pick up my phone to dial her number, to tell her I was scared, that my marriage was falling apart, that I didn't know how to fix it. But dead people don't answer phones, and the living can't always hear what you're really saying anyway. When I started bleeding that morning, my first thought wasn't about the baby. It was about Daniel, about how disappointed he'd be, about how this would be just another failure in a string of failures. I was right about that part. What I didn't expect was that he'd blame me entirely, that losing the baby would be the excuse he'd been looking for to finally discard me completely. Standing in that bedroom doorway, telling me to leave while my body was still bleeding from the loss of our child, Daniel showed me exactly who he'd always been. I'd just been too in love, too hopeful, too desperate to believe in the fairy tale to see it. "You have 30 seconds to explain why you're still in my house." Those words changed everything. They came from the man who'd promised to love me through sickness and health just 3 years ago. The same man who'd held my hand in the emergency room 12 hours earlier while I lost our baby. Now he stood in our bedroom doorway, checking his Rolex like I was a business meeting running overtime. My name is Sophia Brooks, and this is the story of how I went from losing everything that mattered to me, my baby, my marriage, my home, to standing in a courtroom 18 months later, watching my ex-husband beg for mercy while I held the power to destroy him completely. But before I tell you what happened in that courtroom, before I explain how karma works in ways you'd never expect, let me ask you something. Have you ever had someone look at you like you're worthless? Like your pain is an inconvenience to their schedule? Where are you watching from right now? I hope you're somewhere comfortable. Maybe it's raining outside where you are, or maybe the sun is shining. Either way, I want you to know that this story, my story, might be hard to hear at times. But I promise you, if you stay with me through the darkness, you'll understand why sometimes the worst moments of our lives are actually preparing us for something we never saw coming. I was 24 when I married Daniel Brooks. Young, naive, and completely in love with a man who seemed to have it all figured out. He was 32, owned a successful tech company, and when he looked at me, I felt like I was the only person in his world. I believed in fairy tales then. I believed that love conquered everything, that marriage meant partnership, that when you promised forever, you meant it. The morning I lost our baby started like any other. I woke up feeling strange, went to the bathroom, and saw blood. Not a lot, but enough to know something was wrong. Daniel was already at work. He'd been leaving earlier and earlier lately, building his empire, he said. For us, he said. For our future family. By the time I reached the hospital, the cramps had started. By the time Daniel arrived 2 hours later, annoyed that I'd interrupted his investor meeting, it was over. Our baby was gone. The doctor said it wasn't my fault. These things happen, she said. 1 in 4 pregnancies end this way. You can try again when you're ready. But Daniel heard something different. All he heard was failure. The ride home was silent. I held the discharge papers in my lap, my body still cramping, my heart shattered into pieces I didn't know how to put back together. Daniel drove with one hand on the wheel, the other scrolling through emails at red lights. When we pulled into our driveway, the driveway of the house he'd bought before we met, the house where I never quite felt at home, he finally spoke. This is probably for the best, he said. You weren't ready to be a mother anyway. I should have known then. I should have seen what was coming. But grief does strange things to your mind. It makes you cling to whatever feels stable, even when that stability is an illusion. I spent the rest of that day in bed, curled up under blankets that smelled like the lavender detergent I'd bought specifically because the pregnancy websites said it was calming for expectant mothers. Daniel disappeared into his home office. I could hear him on conference calls, laughing with colleagues, his voice carrying through the walls like nothing had happened. Like we hadn't just lost our child. Around 6 in the evening, he came upstairs. I thought he was coming to check on me, maybe to hold me, maybe to grieve with me. Instead, he stood in that doorway and spoke those words that would change everything. You have 30 seconds to explain why you're still in my house. I sat up, confused, thinking I'd misheard him. What? This isn't working, Sophia. It hasn't been working for months. The baby was the only thing keeping me here, and now. He shrugged. Actually shrugged, like we were discussing a canceled dinner reservation. I need you out. Tonight. Daniel, I just had a miscarriage. I just lost our. You lost a pregnancy. It happens. But I'm done pretending this marriage is something it's not. I've already talked to my lawyer. You'll get what you're entitled to, which isn't much since you signed the prenup. The house is mine, the cars are mine, the accounts are mine. You can take your clothes and whatever you brought into this marriage, which from what I remember, wasn't much. I stared at him, trying to reconcile this cold stranger with the man who'd cried when he proposed to me on the beach in Santa Barbara. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem anymore. You've got family somewhere, don't you? That small town you're always talking about visiting but never do. My grandmother's town. The place where I'd spent summers as a child, where she'd raised me for 2 years after my parents died in a car accident when I was 7. I hadn't been back since her funeral 5 years ago. But let me start from the beginning. 3 years earlier, I was working as a receptionist at a medical clinic in Los Angeles, living paycheck to paycheck in a studio apartment I shared with a roommate who kept stealing my yogurt from the fridge. That's where I met Daniel. He came in for a routine physical required by his insurance company. Apparently, when you're the CEO of your own company, even at 29, people want to make sure you're not going to drop dead and tank their investments. He was different from the other wealthy patients who came through our doors. He actually looked at me when he spoke, remembered my name after the first visit, and when he came back 2 weeks later for blood work results, he asked me to dinner. What's in Millbrook? Nothing, I admitted. My grandmother's house, but I don't even know if I still have the right to be there. She left it to me, but I haven't been back since her funeral. There's probably 5 years of unpaid property taxes. I don't know. I need somewhere to go, and it's the only place I can think of. Rosa studied me in the rear-view mirror. You got family there? Friends?
No.
My grandmother was all I had, and she's been gone for 5 years. Then why go back? I thought about it, about the small house with its peeling paint and garden my grandmother had loved. About the town where everyone knew everyone, where my grandmother had been respected despite having no money, where people still probably remembered me as the little girl who'd lost her parents. Because it's the only place where someone once loved me without conditions, I said. Rosa drove me all the way to the bus station, helped me get my suitcase out, and then pressed $40 into my hand.
For food, she said.
And honey, whatever that man took from you, he didn't take the important stuff. That's still in there. She pointed to my chest, where my heart was still somehow beating despite feeling like it had been ripped out. The bus to Millbrook left at 11 p.m. I sat in the station for 3 hours, watching people come and go, wondering how many of them were running from something or someone. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Your things are on the porch if you forgot anything. They'll be in the trash tomorrow. I turned off my phone. Whatever was on that porch, whatever I'd left behind, it wasn't worth going back for. Nothing in that house had ever really been mine anyway, except the illusions I'd brought with me and the heartbreak I was taking away. The bus to Millbrook smelled like old coffee and desperation. I found a seat in the back, wedged between the window and a woman traveling with 3 kids who took turns crying for the entire 6 hours. I didn't mind. Their noise kept me from thinking too much about the cramps still rippling through my abdomen or the fact that 12 hours ago I'd had a home, a husband, and a baby growing inside me. My phone buzzed around 2 a.m. Daniel again. Your medical insurance is canceled effective immediately. Thought you should know. Then another. Miranda thinks I'm being too generous letting you take your clothes. She would have had you arrested for trespassing. And another. The locks have been changed. Don't even think about coming back. I turned the phone completely off this time, took out the battery for good measure. Let him text into the void. The woman next to me, bouncing a baby on her lap, noticed my face. You okay, sweetheart?
Yeah, elite.
Just a long day. Tell me about it. I'm leaving my husband too, she said, matter of fact, like she was telling me about the weather. Took me 3 years to save up enough for bus tickets. He doesn't know we're gone yet. Won't notice until tomorrow when there's no dinner on the table. Where are you going? I asked. My sister's place in Oregon. You? My grandmother's house. She passed away, but she left it to me. That's good. Having somewhere to land, that's everything. I didn't tell her I wasn't sure I actually had anywhere to land. That the house might be condemned by now, or sold for back taxes, or occupied by squatters. I'd been sending small checks to cover property tax when I could, before Daniel had convinced me to quit my job, but I hadn't sent anything in over 2 years. We reached Millbrook at 5 a.m., just as the sky was starting to lighten. The bus station was exactly as I remembered it, a small building that also served as the town's post office and general store. Mr. Henley still ran it, though his hair had gone completely white since I'd last seen him. Sophia? He squinted at me as I dragged my suitcase off the bus. Sophia Kowalski? That can't be you. Hi, Mr. Henley. I'd taken Daniel's last name when we married, but here, I would always be my grandmother's granddaughter. Always be a Kowalski. We heard you got married to some rich fellow down in Los Angeles. What brings you back here? Just visiting, I said, not ready to explain that my rich fellow had thrown me out like garbage. Well, your grandmother's house is still standing, if that's where you're headed. The Mitchells have been keeping an eye on it, mowing the lawn and such. They said you'd been sending money when you could, but that stopped a while back. Everything okay? It's fine, I said. I'll sort it out. The walk to my grandmother's house was only 15 minutes, but pulling the suitcase with my body still weak from the miscarriage made it feel like hours. The town was waking up. I passed the diner where my grandmother had sometimes treated me to pancakes on my birthday, the church where she'd never missed a Sunday service, the library where I'd spent countless afternoons reading while she worked. The house sat at the end of Maple Street, looking exactly as I'd left it, but somehow smaller. The pale yellow paint was peeling worse than before, and the porch sagged a little more, but the garden, my grandmother's prize roses, someone had been tending them. They bloomed red and pink in the early morning light. I found the spare key exactly where my grandmother had always kept it, under the ceramic frog by the back door. The house smelled musty, but not abandoned. There was even fresh water in a vase on the kitchen table with a note. Heard you might be coming back. The fridge is stocked with basics. Betty Mitchell. I sat down at the kitchen table, the same one where my grandmother had taught me to fold piragis, where she'd helped me with homework, where she'd told me about the trust fund 2 weeks before she died. It's not much, she'd said, her hands shaking as she held mine. But I've been putting money away since you were born. Every extra penny, every birthday dollar, every Christmas tip. It's all invested in something called a growth fund. The banker said it would mature when you turn 27. He said by then, it might be worth something real. How much did you put in, Grandma? $12,000 over 20 years, she said proudly. I know it's not a fortune, but with compound interest, maybe it'll be enough for a house down payment someday. The papers are in the safety deposit box at the bank. Promise me you'll wait until you're 27. The banker was very specific about that. I'd promised, not having the heart to tell her that $12,000, even with 27 years of interest, wouldn't buy a closet in Los Angeles. My phone, when I finally put the battery back in, had 47 messages from Daniel. They started angry, progressed to threatening, then strangely turned pleading. We need to talk about the divorce papers. You need to sign quickly, so we can both move on. Miranda and I are just business partners. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. If you don't respond, my lawyer will have to track you down. Sophia, please. Just sign the papers. The last one, sent just an hour ago. I know where you are. Millbrook, right? Your grandmother's house? Just sign the papers, and I'll leave you alone. I'll even send you some money to get by. $10,000.
Cash.
Just sign. $10,000. He wanted me gone so badly, he was willing to pay. But why the urgency? We'd only been separated for less than 24 hours. I called the one person I still had a number for in Los Angeles, Janet, who worked reception at the clinic where I'd met Daniel. Sophia. Oh my God, are you okay? That psycho husband of yours called here looking for you.
Ivy fine.
Janet, can you do me a favor? Can you look up when Daniel first started seeing his new doctor? After he switched from our clinic? Hold on. I heard typing. That's weird. He never switched. He's still listed as a patient here. Last appointment was 2 days ago. Came in for STD testing. 2 days ago? That was the day before my miscarriage. Yeah, and get this, he listed his emergency contact as someone named Miranda Chin. Relationship. Domestic partner. Domestic partner. Not business associate. The room spun a little. Janet, how long has she been listed as his emergency contact? Let me check. Looks like he updated it 6 months ago. 6 months. When I was struggling to get pregnant, when he was becoming distant, when he started working late every night. He'd been planning this for 6 months. There's more, Janet said, lowering her voice. I probably shouldn't tell you this, but after what he did to you, he came in for fertility testing 8 months ago. The results. Sophia, he's essentially sterile. Less than 1% chance of ever fathering a child naturally. The phone slipped from my hand. I was pregnant. Had been pregnant. Despite Daniel being essentially sterile. Which meant...
No.
I knew what it meant. The baby had been a miracle, a 1 in a million chance, and Daniel had known all along that if I lost it, there would likely never be another. He'd known, and he'd let me blame myself, let me think I'd failed him when really, the failure had always been his. I picked up the phone. Janet, I have to go. Sophia, are you sure you're okay? Do you need anything? I'm going to be fine, I said, and for the first time since leaving Los Angeles, I thought it might actually be true. I spent the rest of that first day cleaning the house, airing out rooms, trying not to think about the life I'd lost. Betty Mitchell came by in the afternoon with a casserole and news that set another piece of the puzzle in place. Your grandmother was quite the character, she said, settling into the kitchen chair like she'd never left. Did you know she played the stock market?
What?
No, she barely had money for groceries. Betty laughed. That's what she wanted everyone to think. But I helped her with her computer sometimes. She never quite got the hang of email, and I saw her checking these investment accounts. She'd buy these tiny amounts of stock in companies she believed in. $10 here, $20 there. Said she was building something for you. She told me she'd saved $12,000. Oh, honey, that was just the initial amount. She kept adding to it. Every week, even if it was just $5. Compound interest is the 8th wonder of the world, she used to say. Time and patience, that's all it takes. The divorce papers arrived 3 days later, delivered by a process server who looked apologetic as I signed for them. 500 pages of legal documents, all basically saying the same thing. I got nothing. But buried on page 387, in a section about future assets and inheritances, was a clause that made my blood run cold. Daniel was claiming rights to any inheritance I might receive in the next 10 years, arguing that since we were married when my grandmother died, any delayed inheritance was communal property. He knew about the trust. Somehow he knew. I called the only lawyer in Millbrook, Tom Bradley, who'd gone to high school with my mother. This is sophisticated stuff, Tom said, flipping through the papers. This isn't standard divorce paperwork. This is someone going after something specific. What are you telling me, Sophia? My grandmother left me a trust that matures when I turn 27. That's in 2 years. How much? I don't know exactly. She saved $12,000 initially, invested it. Maybe it's worth 30 or 40,000 now. Tom looked at me strangely. Have you checked? Have you called the investment firm?
No,
I haven't had time. Sophia, your husband hired Brennan, Cole, and Associates. They're a billion-dollar divorce firm. You don't hire them to go after $40,000.
My phone rang.
Daniel, don't answer. Tom started, but I'd already picked up. Sophia, finally. We need to talk. I have nothing to say to you. You have everything to say to me. Sign the papers.
Today.
I'll wire you $25,000 the moment my lawyer confirms receipt. Yesterday, it was $10,000. Fine, $30,000. But it has to be today. Why today, Daniel? What's the rush? Silence. Then, Miranda's pregnant. The words hit me like a physical blow. What? 8 weeks. We want to get married before she starts showing. But I can't marry her until our divorce is final, and in California, that takes 6 months unless both parties agree to expedite. So agree. Sign the papers. Take the money and disappear. You were cheating on me. We were separated emotionally long before. We were married. I was pregnant with your child, which was supposedly impossible since you're sterile. Now the silence was on his end. How did you? It doesn't matter how I know. What matters is that you knew you couldn't have children. You let me think losing the baby was my fault, and you were already with Miranda. How long, Daniel? How long were you with her while I was trying to give you a family? Sign the papers, Sophia.
No.
I'll destroy you. I'll make sure you never work anywhere decent again. You'll what? Take everything from me? You already did that. Goodbye, Daniel. I hung up. Tom was staring at me. He got another woman pregnant?
Tom asked.
Apparently. But he's sterile? Medically speaking, yes. Tom laughed, actually laughed. So either it's a miracle, or it's not his. Either way, this changes things. California's a no-fault divorce state, but adultery still matters in property division. And if he was hiding assets, planning this divorce while you were married. I don't want his money. No, but you don't want him taking yours either. This trust your grandmother left. We need to find out exactly what it's worth. Today. The bank was a 5-minute walk. The same building where my grandmother had done her banking for 60 years, where she'd deposited every paycheck, where she'd apparently been quietly building something she never told me about. The bank manager, Mrs. Chun, no relation to Miranda, thankfully, remembered me. Sophia, we've been wondering when you'd come in. We've been sending statements to your grandmother's house, but they've been returned. Statements. For the trust account. It's substantial. Your grandmother was quite the investor. Can you tell me the balance? Mrs. Chin typed into her computer, then turned the screen toward me. I stared at the number, sure I was reading it wrong. There were too many zeros. That can't be right, I said. $100.3 million, Mrs. Chun read. As of today's market close. Tom grabbed the desk. I sat down hard in the nearest chair. That's impossible, I whispered. She saved $12,000. Even with compound interest over 27 years. Oh, this wasn't passive investing, Mrs. Chin said, pulling up more screens. Your grandmother was brilliant. She bought Apple stock in 1997 when it was $12 a share. Amazon in 1998. Google at its IPO. Netflix when everyone thought Blockbuster would crush them. She had this uncanny ability to spot companies that would change the world. And she never sold. Ever. Just kept buying tiny amounts with every paycheck. My grandmother barely knew how to use email. That's what she wanted people to think. But she came in here every week, reading investment magazines, asking questions. She said she was building a fortress for you. One that no man could ever take away. A fortress no man could take away. My grandmother had known. Somehow, she'd known I'd need this. The trust matures in 2 years, Mrs. Chin continued. On your 27th birthday. But there's a provision for early access in case of emergency, medical crisis, homelessness, or domestic violence. I think you qualify for all 3. But if Daniel knows about this, he can't touch it, Tom said, reading the trust documents. Your grandmother set it up before you were married. It's ironclad. But Sophia, he must have found out somehow. That's why he's pushing so hard for you to sign. In California, if you sign away rights to future inheritances, that's binding. He's trying to get you to sign away $100 million for $30,000. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize, with a photo attached. I opened it and nearly threw the phone across the room. It was Daniel and Miranda, her hand on her still flat stomach, standing in what used to be my bedroom. They'd already redecorated. The walls were now gray instead of the warm cream I'd painted them. Our wedding photo had been replaced with abstract art, and Miranda was wearing the necklace Daniel had given me for our first anniversary, the one he'd said was at the jeweler's for cleaning when I'd asked about it last month. The message read, "This is what happiness looks like. Stop being bitter and move on. M." Another text from Daniel. Last offer. 50,000 cash. Sign today or get nothing. I turned to Tom. Can you handle the divorce? Sophia, I'm a small-town lawyer. You need someone who can fight Brennan, Cole, and Associates. Can you buy me time? Just stall them until I turn 27. That's 2 years away. I know. But my grandmother waited 27 years to build this for me. I can wait 2 more. Tom smiled. I can stall. I'm very good at paperwork delays, missed deadlines that technically aren't missed, requests for clarification that take months to resolve. But Sophia, you need to know, Daniel's going to get nasty when he realizes what you're worth. How could he know? I didn't even know. Someone told him. Someone who had access to information about the trust. I thought about it, and then it hit me. The estate lawyer. When my grandmother died, Daniel insisted on helping me with the paperwork. Said he wanted to make sure everything was handled properly. He must have seen something in the documents. But not the full amount, or he never would have let you go. No, he probably just saw that there was a trust worth approximately something. Knowing Daniel, he assumed it was worth whatever the initial investment was plus basic interest. Maybe $100,000 at most. My phone rang again. This time it was a Los Angeles number I recognized. Sarah Brennan herself, Daniel's divorce attorney. Mrs. Brooks? This is Sarah Brennan. I believe you received our divorce petition. I did. Excellent. When can we expect the signed documents? You can't. I'm sorry. I'm not signing anything without my own lawyer reviewing everything. That's my right, isn't it? Of course, but Mr. Brooks is offering a very generous settlement. $50,000 for a 3-year marriage with no children and no assets brought into the union is quite substantial. There was a child. I had a miscarriage 5 days ago. I'm sorry for your loss, but legally. And there were assets. My inheritance from my grandmother, which you received before the marriage, making it separate property. Part of it. The trust portion doesn't mature for 2 years. Silence. Then, what trust portion? So Daniel hadn't told her everything. Interesting. The one worth approximately, well, my lawyer advises me not to discuss specific numbers. Mrs. Brooks, if there are hidden assets, we need full disclosure. There's nothing hidden. It's all documented. My lawyer will be in touch. I hung up. Tom was grinning. You just rattled a $500 an hour attorney, he said. Your grandmother would be proud. The next 3 weeks were hell. Pure, unfiltered hell that started the moment Daniel realized I wasn't rolling over. It began with the freeze. Every bank account I'd ever been associated with was suddenly under review. The $800 I'd had in my personal checking account? Frozen due to suspicious activity. The credit card I'd forgotten I had, the one with a $500 limit I'd kept for emergencies, canceled for fraudulent usage patterns. He can't do that, Tom said when I called him, hungry because I'd been living on Betty Mitchell's casseroles and my grandmother's canned goods. Apparently he can. His lawyer is claiming I made unauthorized purchases during our marriage, that I need to account for every penny spent before any assets can be released. That's illegal. Only if we can prove it, and proving it costs money. I don't have. The second wave came through social media. I didn't have much of a presence online, but suddenly my phone was blowing up with notifications. Someone had created a fake Instagram account using my name and photos from my marriage, posting about how I was a gold digger who'd tried to baby trap a successful CEO. The comments were brutal. Strangers calling me names I'd never repeat, sending death threats, telling me I deserved to lose my baby. Daniel's company put out a press release about his engagement to Miranda, painting her as the woman who'd saved him from a toxic marriage and brought light back into his life after a difficult period. Tech blogs picked it up. Business Insider ran a puff piece about their power couple romance. In every article, I was the unnamed ex-wife who'd tried to destroy a brilliant entrepreneur. But the worst part was the physical aftermath of the miscarriage that nobody talks about. 3 weeks later, I was still bleeding intermittently, still having cramps that would drop me to my knees. And without insurance, I couldn't see a doctor. The free clinic in Millbrook had a 2-month waiting list unless you were actively dying. I was sitting on my grandmother's bathroom floor, trying not to pass out from pain, when my phone rang. Unknown number. Is this Sophia Brooks? A woman's voice, professional but cold. Yes. This is Amanda Chun from Child Protective Services. My blood went cold. I don't have any children. We received a report that you're pregnant and living in unsafe conditions, potentially endangering your unborn child. I'm not pregnant. I had a miscarriage 3 weeks ago. We'll need medical documentation of that. Can you provide proof of appropriate medical care following your loss? I haven't been able to see a doctor. So you haven't received proper post-miscarriage care? That's concerning. We'll need to do a welfare check. Someone will be by tomorrow. She hung up. I knew exactly who'd called CPS. Miranda's sister worked for the county in Los Angeles. They were trying to create a paper trail, make me look unstable, unfit. For what purpose, I didn't know yet, but with Daniel, there was always a purpose. The CPS worker showed up the next day, looked around my grandmother's perfectly clean, perfectly safe house, and left shaking her head. I'm sorry you're going through this, she said. Clearly someone is harassing you. But I have to file the report anyway. More paper trail. More documentation of chaos in my life. Tom called that afternoon. They've filed a motion. They're claiming you're mentally unstable, that you're fabricating the trust to extort money from Daniel. They want you to submit to a psychiatric evaluation. Can they force me to do that? No, but if you refuse, they'll use it against you. Say you're hiding something. I laughed, but it came out sounding unhinged even to my own ears. I'm living on canned soup in my dead grandmother's house while my ex-husband's pregnant girlfriend wears my jewelry. Maybe I am unstable. Sophia. I have $100 million coming to me, Tom, and I can't afford to buy groceries. Do you understand how insane that is? The bank can release emergency funds. Mrs. Chin said.
$22,000.
That's the maximum emergency release. And if I take it, Daniel's lawyers will claim I'm depleting marital assets, that the money should be frozen until the divorce is settled. It's a trap. Everything was a trap. Every move I could make had been anticipated, countered, blocked. Daniel had spent 6 months planning this, maybe longer. I'd been playing checkers while he was playing chess, and I hadn't even known there was a game. That night, the power went out. Not a storm, not an accident. Someone had called the power company, claimed to be me, and canceled the service. It took 3 days to get it turned back on. 3 days of no heat in early March, no hot water, no way to cook the little food I had. I wrapped myself in my grandmother's quilts and wondered if Daniel knew how close he was pushing me to just giving up. Betty Mitchell found me on day 3, sitting on the porch because it was warmer outside than inside. That's it, she said. You're coming to stay with us. I can't. You can and you will. This is ridiculous. That man is trying to break you, and I won't stand by and watch it happen. I stayed with the Mitchells for a week, eating real food, taking hot showers, remembering what it felt like to be treated like a human being. But then the letters started coming to their house. Legal documents that needed immediate responses. Threatening notices about lawsuits. Their phone ringing at all hours with hang-ups. I can't do this to you, I told Betty. He's targeting you because you're helping me. Let him try.
No.
I won't let him hurt anyone else. I moved back to my grandmother's house. The power was on, but now the internet had been cut off. Then the gas. Each utility took days to restore, cost money, I didn't have to reconnect. Daniel was bleeding me dry, dollar by dollar, inconvenience by inconvenience. The lowest point came on a Tuesday. I'd been back in Millbrook for 2 months. I was down to my last $20, had lost 15 pounds I didn't have to lose, and hadn't slept more than 3 hours straight in weeks. I was sitting at my grandmother's kitchen table, staring at the divorce papers, thinking about signing them just to make it stop. My phone rang. Daniel. You look tired, he said. What? In the window. You look exhausted. You should really take better care of yourself. I ran to the window. A black town car was parked across the street. He waved from the back seat. What do you want? To end this. Sign the papers, Sophia. Take the $50,000 and walk away. You can't win this. You know that, right? I have unlimited resources. The best lawyers.
Time.
You have nothing. I have the truth. The truth?
He laughed.
The truth is that you're a nobody from nowhere who got lucky for 3 years. The truth is that you lost our baby because your body couldn't handle the basic biological function of carrying a child. The truth is that Miranda is everything you weren't, sophisticated, connected, capable of giving me the family I deserve. Each word was calculated to hurt, and they did. Even knowing he was lying, manipulating, they still cut deep. The truth, I said quietly, is that you're sterile. Miranda's baby isn't yours. Silence. Then, you're right. It's not mine biologically. We used a donor. Someone with better genetics than either of us. Someone who graduated from Harvard, who has an IQ of 160, who's never had a history of failure in their family. You mean someone who isn't me. I mean someone who matters. Sign the papers, Sophia. This is my last offer. Tomorrow, the number drops to 25,000. The day after that, nothing. And I'll keep coming. I'll keep making your life hell until you break. And you will break. Everyone does. He hung up. The town car drove away. I sat on the floor and cried until I couldn't breathe. Not pretty tears, not dignified grief, but body shaking, snot producing, ugly crying that felt like it might turn me inside out. I cried for my baby, for my marriage, for the person I'd been who believed love was enough. I cried until I had nothing left, until I was empty and hollow and done. That's when I saw it. A letter that had fallen behind the radiator, probably years ago. The envelope had my name on it in my grandmother's handwriting. Inside, dated just a week before she died, was a single paragraph. My darling Sophia, if you're reading this, things have gotten bad. Remember that the darkest hour is just before dawn. Remember that I didn't scrub floors and clean toilets for 60 years so you could give up when some man tries to break you. The money I saved isn't just currency. It's power, it's freedom. It's your chance to become who you were meant to be. Don't let anyone make you small. Not ever. Stand up, granddaughter. Stand up and fight. I was standing in the grocery store, holding a can of soup that cost $3, trying to decide if I could afford it, when I heard a voice behind me. Sophia Kowalski? I turned. A man in his 60s stood there, wearing an expensive suit that looked out of place in Millbrook's only grocery store. He had kind eyes and silver hair, and something about him seemed familiar. I'm Sophia Brooks now. Or was. I'm getting divorced. I know. I'm Robert Zhang. I was your grandmother's investment advisor. I nearly dropped the soup. You're the one who helped her build the trust? No, your grandmother built it herself. I just facilitated the trades. She was the genius. I've been looking for you. When I heard you were back in town, we need to talk. If this is about the trust, I can't access it for 2 more years. That's not entirely true. Your grandmother built in provisions. She seemed to anticipate that you might need help before 27. Can we go somewhere private? We went to the diner and Robert ordered coffee and sandwiches for both of us. I try not to eat too quickly, but I was starving. Your grandmother was remarkable, Robert began. She came to me 25 years ago with $12,000 and a plan. She'd been reading every investment book in the library, studying companies, understanding trends. She had this ability to see which companies would matter in the future. Everyone says that, but she could barely use a computer. That was an act. She didn't want people to know how smart she was. Said it was better to be underestimated. She'd come to my office after hours and we'd research companies together. She was particularly interested in technology that would change how people lived. What will make life easier for a single mother, she'd ask. What will help a grandmother connect with her grandchildren? Those questions led her to invest in Apple, Amazon, Google. Why didn't she ever tell me? She was protecting you. She said money changes people, makes them targets. She wanted you to find someone who loved you for you, not for what you might inherit. I laughed bitterly. Well, that worked out great. Your husband doesn't know the full amount, does he?
No.
He thinks it's maybe 100,000 at most. Robert pulled out his phone, showed me a number. As of today, with the market uptick, the trust is worth $103,700,000. How is that possible from 12,000? Compound growth, reinvested dividends, and perfect timing. Your grandmother never sold during downturns. Never panicked. She had a 27-year timeline and stuck to it. But here's what you need to know. There's a provision for cases of domestic abuse or abandonment. You can access up to $5 million immediately. $5 million. She wanted to make sure you could fight back if someone tried to hurt you. The question is, do you want to fight? Or do you want to take the easy path and sign his papers? I thought about the last 2 months. The humiliation, the hunger, the isolation. Then I thought about my grandmother, scrubbing floors while secretly building a fortune. About her letter telling me to stand up and fight. What would fighting look like? Robert smiled. First, we get you a real lawyer. Not Tom, he's lovely, but out of his league. I know someone in San Francisco. Catherine Walsh. She eats lawyers like Sarah Brennan for breakfast. Second, we get you healthy. You need to see a doctor, get proper care. Third, we make sure Daniel understands exactly who he's dealing with. He'll escalate if I fight back. Let him. Every nasty thing he does becomes evidence. Every threat, every manipulation, it all builds your case. Your grandmother knew you might face something like this. She even left a sealed letter with me, to give you if you ever faced what she called a wolf in sheep's clothing. He handed me an envelope. Inside, my grandmother's handwriting. My dear Sophia, if Robert has given you this letter, then someone has tried to diminish you. Know this, you come from a line of women who survived war, famine, and displacement. Your great-grandmother walked across Poland with nothing but the clothes on her back. Your grandmother, me, came to America with $17 and built a life. You have their blood, their strength, their refusal to surrender. The money is just a tool. Your real inheritance is the iron in your spine. Use both wisely. So, Robert said, what's it going to be? Sign his papers and walk away with 50,000? Or fight for what's really yours? I thought about Daniel in his town car, so confident he'd broken me. About Miranda wearing my jewelry, sleeping in my bed, carrying a baby that wasn't even Daniel's. About the baby I'd lost, the grief I'd carried alone, the systematic destruction of my life over the past 2 months. I want to fight, I said. But I don't want to become like him. I don't want to be cruel. Your grandmother anticipated that too. She always said the best revenge was a life well lived. So we're not going to destroy Daniel, though we could. We're going to build you up so high that his attempts to tear you down become irrelevant.
How?
First, we transfer $5 million from the trust to your account. Then we call Catherine Walsh. Then you get medical care. And then we start building your new life. Your grandmother had ideas about that too. She wanted you to help other women who'd been where you've been. She even picked out a building in San Francisco that would be perfect for a women's foundation. She planned all this? She planned for contingencies. She said men had been controlling women through money for centuries, and it was time for that to change. starting with you. I sat there in that small-town diner, eating a sandwich I hadn't paid for myself in months, and made the choice that would change everything. Not just to fight back, but to transform. To become someone Daniel never imagined I could be. "Make the call," I said to Robert. "Get me that lawyer." He smiled and pulled out his phone. While he talked to Catherine Walsh's office, I read my grandmother's letter again. The iron in your spine. I straightened in my seat, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Not quite confidence, not yet, but the possibility of it. The embryo of who I might become. "Catherine can see you tomorrow," Robert said. "She's flying up from San Francisco specifically for this. She says she's been waiting for a case like yours. Something about teaching certain law firms that money doesn't always win." "I can't afford her." "Yes, you can. The $5 million will be in your account by morning. But she says she'd take this case for free just for the pleasure of going up against Sarah Brennan." "Why?" "Apparently Sarah stole Catherine's husband 15 years ago. She's been waiting for the right case to face her in court." I laughed, really laughed for the first time in months. "So, everyone has their revenge story?" "Everyone has their comeback story," Robert corrected. "The question is whether they choose to write it."
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow I will meet Catherine Walsh. Tomorrow I will see a doctor. Tomorrow I would stop being Daniel's victim and start being my own hero. But tonight, I would go back to my grandmother's house, stand in her kitchen where she'd planned all of this, and thank her for seeing a future I couldn't have imagined. 14 months later, I stood outside the San Francisco courthouse, wearing a simple navy dress my grandmother would have loved. Not expensive, but perfectly tailored. Catherine Walsh stood beside me, reviewing notes on her phone. "Remember," she said, "he doesn't know about the full amount. He still thinks he's fighting over small trust. Let him keep thinking that until the moment is right." The divorce had dragged on for over a year. Daniel had fought every motion, challenged every document, demanded evaluation after evaluation. But Catherine was patient, methodical, and ruthless in her own quiet way. She documented everything. Every harassing phone call, every frozen account, every attempt to break me. What Daniel didn't know was that during those 14 months, I hadn't just been fighting a divorce. I'd been building something. The $5 million had grown to $8 million through careful investments Robert helped me make. I'd founded the Brooks Foundation. I kept the name out of spite, which helped women recovering from miscarriage and domestic abuse. We'd helped 43 women so far, providing emergency housing, medical care, and legal support. I'd also gotten healthy. The best doctors in San Francisco had treated the complications from my miscarriage. Turned out I'd had retained tissue that could have killed me if left untreated much longer. My medical records from that treatment would be entered into evidence today. Daniel's lawyers had demanded them, thinking they'd show I was unstable. Instead, they showed medical neglect that bordered on criminal. "They're here," Catherine said. Daniel walked up the courthouse steps with Sarah Brennan and his legal team. 6 lawyers in total, all billing at least $500 an hour. Miranda was with him, very pregnant now, wearing a maternity dress that probably cost more than most people's rent. She saw me and smirked, her hand protective over her belly. Daniel looked good. He always did. His company had recovered from its earlier troubles, mostly thanks to Miranda's connections in Asia. The tech blogs called them the power couple of Silicon Valley. Their wedding was scheduled for next month at a Napa vineyard. I knew because Miranda had made sure to send an invitation to my grandmother's house, addressed to the former Mrs. Brooks. Inside the courtroom, Judge Patricia Thornton presided. She was known for being fair, but having no patience for games. Over the past year, she'd grown increasingly frustrated with Daniel's tactics. "We're here for final disposition of assets and to address the matter of the trust fund left to Ms. Brooks by her grandmother," Judge Thornton began. "Mr. Brooks, your counsel has claimed rights to this trust based on California community property laws. Ms. Brooks contests this. Ms. Walsh, present your case." Catherine stood. "Your Honor, we'd like to start by establishing the timeline of Mr. Brooks' knowledge of this trust and his actions upon learning of it." She pulled up a presentation on the courtroom screen. On March 15th, the day after Ms. Brooks' miscarriage, Mr. Brooks demanded she leave their home. Within 24 hours, he had frozen her accounts, canceled her medical insurance, and begun a systematic campaign of financial abuse. Objection, Sarah Brennan said. Emotional characterization. Overruled. Continue, Ms. Walsh. We have phone records showing Mr. Brooks called the investment firm managing the trust 6 months before the separation, impersonating Ms. Brooks' deceased grandmother's attorney. He was trying to get information about the trust's value. Daniel shifted in his seat. This was news to him that we had these records. We also have evidence that Mr. Brooks knew about his fertility issues 8 months before Ms. Brooks' pregnancy, yet allowed her to believe the miscarriage was her fault. Medical records show Mr. Brooks has less than 1% viability. The pregnancy Ms. Brooks lost was, medically speaking, a miracle. Miranda's hand tightened on her belly. She whispered something to Daniel. Furthermore, Catherine continued, we have security footage from Millbrook showing Mr. Brooks surveilling Ms. Brooks at her grandmother's home, during which time he made threats designed to coerce her into signing away her rights to her inheritance. How much is this trust worth exactly? Judge Thornton asked. The initial filing said approximately $100,000. This was the moment. Catherine smiled slightly. Your Honor, as of today's market value, the trust established by Elena Kowalski for her granddaughter is worth $103.7 million. The courtroom went silent. Daniel's face went white. Sarah Brennan's mouth opened, but no words came out. Miranda actually gasped. I'm sorry, Judge Thornton said. Did you say $103 million? Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Brooks' grandmother was a highly successful investor who worked minimum wage jobs while secretly building this fortune over 27 years. The trust was established before Ms. Brooks' marriage and is clearly separate property. Mr. Brooks discovered its existence, but not its value, and attempted to coerce Ms. Brooks into signing away her rights for $50,000 while she was recovering from a miscarriage he caused her to suffer alone. That's a lie. Daniel stood up. I didn't cause. Mr. Brooks, sit down. Judge Thornton commanded. Ms. Walsh, do you have proof of this coercion? We have recordings, Your Honor. Ms. Brooks began recording their conversations after the separation. Catherine played a recording of Daniel from that day in the town car. Sign the papers, Sophia. This is my last offer. Tomorrow, the number drops to 25,000. The day after that, nothing. And I'll keep coming. I'll keep making your life hell until you break. Then another from a week later. You lost our baby because your body couldn't handle the basic biological function of carrying a child. Miranda was staring at Daniel now with something like horror. We also have evidence, Catherine continued, that Mr. Brooks has hidden assets in offshore accounts totaling approximately $12 million, which he failed to disclose in these proceedings. That's impossible, Sarah Brennan said. We've provided full financial disclosure. Really? Catherine pulled up bank records. Then how do you explain these transfers to accounts in the Cayman Islands, made the week before Mr. Brooks filed for divorce? Judge Thornton looked furious. Mr. Brooks, is this true? Daniel was consulting frantically with his lawyers. Finally, Sarah Brennan stood. We'd like to request a recess to review these documents. No, Judge Thornton said. We're settling this today. I've seen enough. The trust is clearly Ms. Brooks' separate property. The hidden assets constitute fraud upon this court. Mr. Brooks, you will forfeit any claim to marital assets and pay Ms. Brooks $5 million in damages for intentional infliction of emotional distress. $5 million. Daniel exploded. She has $100 million, which was never yours, Judge Thornton said coldly. And given your behavior, you're lucky I'm not awarding more. Furthermore, Mr. Brooks, you will pay all legal fees for both parties. Your Honor, Catherine said, there's one more matter. Ms. Brooks would like to address the court. Judge Thornton nodded. Ms. Brooks. I stood, my legs steady for the first time in over a year. Your Honor, I want the record to show that I'm not seeking revenge. The money my grandmother left me is being used to fund the Brooks Foundation, which helps women who've experienced what I went through. In the past year, while Mr. Brooks was trying to destroy me, I've helped 43 women escape situations like mine. That's my grandmother's real legacy. I turned to Daniel and Miranda. I want you both to know that your donor baby will have a college fund from the Brooks Foundation, should they ever need it. Because no child should suffer for their parents' choices. And Miranda, when he does to you what he did to me, and he will, the foundation will be there for you too. Miranda's face crumbled. Daniel grabbed her arm, but she pulled away. One last thing, I said, pulling out a document. This is a letter from Tesla, SpaceX, and Apple. They're terminating their contracts with Mr. Brooks' company effective immediately. Turns out they don't want to work with someone who abuses women. They're transferring those contracts to a company I'm partnering with, run by 3 women who left Mr. Brooks' company after experiencing harassment. Daniel's phone was buzzing frantically. His investors, no doubt, learning that he'd just lost 70% of his revenue. Court is adjourned, Judge Thornton said. Mr. Brooks, I suggest you get your affairs in order. And Ms. Brooks, your grandmother would be proud. As we walked out of the courthouse, Daniel tried to approach me, but Catherine stepped between us. Sophia, please, he said, looking desperate. You don't understand. Without those contracts, I'll lose everything. I do understand, I said calmly. I lost everything too. The difference is, I built something better from the ashes. Miranda was waiting by their car, crying. As we passed, she called out. Is it true? What you said about the foundation helping women like us? I stopped, handed her a card. When you're ready. 3 weeks later, she called. Daniel had left her for another woman, someone even younger, someone he thought could save his crumbling empire. Miranda was 6 months pregnant, alone, and scared. The Brooks Foundation helped her find housing, get proper medical care, and start rebuilding her life. 2 years later, I stood in the ballroom of the St. Francis Hotel in San Francisco, watching 300 women raise their champagne glasses in a toast. The Brooks Foundation's annual gala had raised $4 million in a single night. Every penny would go to women starting over after loss. Hard to believe this all started in your grandmother's kitchen, Robert Jong said, joining me at the balcony overlooking the celebration. She would have loved this, I said. All these women helping each other. She would have loved what you've become, he corrected. The foundation had grown beyond anything I'd imagined. We now operated in 12 cities, had helped over 500 women, and provided emergency medical care to thousands more. The trust had grown too. Smart investments and the tech contracts had pushed it to almost $200 million. Every dollar working to change lives. Is that him? Robert asked, nodding toward a man near the bar. I smiled. That's James. James Chun, no relation to Miranda, was a pediatric surgeon I'd met at a medical conference where I was speaking about pregnancy loss and recovery. He was kind, brilliant, and had spent 3 months just being my friend before asking me to dinner. He knew my whole story, had helped me through the nightmares that still came sometimes, and never once made me feel like my past defined my future. The kids love him, I added. 6 months ago, I'd become a foster mother to 2 sisters, aged 7 and 9, whose mother had died from complications after miscarriage. The same thing that could have happened to me if I hadn't finally gotten treatment. They were downstairs now, probably charming everyone at the dessert table. Next month, the adoption would be final. Sophia. A familiar voice called out. I turned to find Miranda walking toward me, looking radiant. Her daughter, Lily, now 18 months old, was at home with a babysitter. Miranda had become one of the Foundation's strongest advocates, using her connections to open doors we never could have accessed otherwise. Did you see the news? She asked, her eyes sparkling. What news? She pulled out her phone, showed me a Business Insider headline. Daniel Brooks files for bankruptcy after second divorce. Company dissolved. I felt nothing. Not satisfaction, not pity, just nothing. Daniel had married the young woman he'd left Miranda for, but she'd left him when the money ran out, taking what little he had left in their prenup-less marriage. Karma had handled him better than I ever could have. The best part, Miranda continued, is that his lawyer, Sarah Brennan? She's been disbarred. Turns out hiding assets in divorce proceedings is a pattern for her. Catherine Walsh made sure the Bar Association knew about every single case. Catherine herself appeared at my elbow, wine glass in hand. Did someone mention my name? Oh, we're talking about Sarah? Yes, well, 15 years is a long time to wait for justice, but it tastes just as sweet.
We all laughed.
The band started playing, and James appeared, offering his hand. May I have this dance? As we moved onto the floor, he whispered, Your grandmother would be so proud. Everyone said that, but tonight I finally believed it. Not just because of the money or the foundation, or even the justice served, but because I'd become someone she would recognize, someone who took the worst thing that ever happened to them and transformed it into purpose. Can I tell you a secret? James asked as we swayed to the music. Always. I'm in love with you. Completely, utterly, no conditions attached, in love with you. I pulled back to look at him. Even knowing everything? Even knowing I can't give you biological children? Sophia, you've already given me a family. You, the girls, this whole beautiful chaos you've created. That's worth more than DNA could ever be. I kissed him then, right there on the dance floor, not caring who saw. For the first time in my life, I felt completely, entirely whole. Not because a man loved me, but because I'd learned to love myself first. Later that night, after the gala ended and the girls were asleep, I sat in my home office, a real office in a real house I'd bought with my own money, and opened my laptop. The YouTube channel I'd started to share stories of survival had reached 1 million subscribers. Tonight's video was special. Hi everyone, I said to the camera. I know you've been following my journey for the past year, and so many of you have shared your own stories of loss, betrayal, and triumph. Tonight, I want to tell you something I learned from my grandmother, who scrubbed floors for 60 years while secretly building a fortune. I held up her photo, the one where she was smiling in her garden, surrounded by roses. She used to say that money wasn't power, it was potential. The potential to change lives, to lift others up, to prove that where you come from doesn't determine where you're going. Every single one of you watching has that same potential. Maybe not $100 million, but something just as valuable, the ability to survive, to transform, to rise. The comments were already flooding in. Women sharing their stories, offering support to each other, creating a community of survivors who refuse to be victims. If you're watching this from a place of pain, I continued, if someone has torn you down, taken everything, made you feel worthless, know this. Your story isn't over. It's just beginning. The money my grandmother left me was never really about the money. It was about freedom. The freedom to choose who I became after the worst day of my life. I looked directly at the camera, thinking of every woman who needed to hear this. So, here's what I want you to do. First, if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring that notification bell, because every week we share stories of women who've rebuilt their lives. Second, share this video with someone who needs it. And third, remember that sometimes the worst thing that happens to you becomes the foundation for the best thing that ever will. Oh, and Daniel, if you're watching this, and I know you are because you've been viewing every video from the same IP address for months, I want you to know something. I forgive you. Not for your sake, but for mine. You gave me the greatest gift imaginable. You showed me exactly who you were, which taught me exactly who I wanted to become. I signed off, closed the laptop, and went to check on my daughters one more time. They slept peacefully, unaware that their mom had once been broken, homeless, bleeding on a bathroom floor. They only knew me as I was now, strong, successful, and completely devoted to making sure they never doubted their worth. James was already in bed, reading a medical journal, because of course he was. I climbed in beside him, and he put his arm around me. Good video? He asked. Good life, I answered. My phone buzzed with a text from Robert. Your grandmother's trust hit $210 million today. Also, found another letter from her. Want me to send it? Tomorrow, I texted back. Tonight, I just want to be present. And I was. Present in my beautiful life, built on the ashes of my worst day, funded by a woman who saw the future before I was even born. My grandmother had given me more than money. She'd given me the chance to prove that some stories, no matter how they begin, can end with joy. If you've made it this far in my story, thank you for listening. Thank you for witnessing my journey from that hospital bed to this moment. And remember, where you are right now, whether it's raining or sunny, whether you're broken or healing, whether you're alone or surrounded by love, you have the power to write your next chapter. Like this video if it touched you. Subscribe for more stories of triumph. Comment below with your own journey. I read every single one. And please, share this with someone who needs to know they're not alone. This is Sophia Brooks, signing off from San Francisco, where it's 70 degrees and perfect, just like this imperfect, beautiful life I've built. Your story isn't over. It's just beginning.